Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode. Today, I am sharing with you how to identify anxious thoughts. I am Sophia, your host. If this is your first time, welcome. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Thank you so much. Let's delve into it. Let's look at polarized thinking, filtering, and labeling. What is polarized thinking? This is our all or nothing way of thinking. We often see this as complete failure. Whatever we have tried, it's complete failure. Polarized thinking. What is filtering? Filtering is the way that we manifest our negative, self defeating thoughts, the details. We are able to filter out the positive ones. And so we just focus on the negative thoughts. Labeling, how we assign labels to ourselves or even to others. So, how are we able to challenge these thoughts? You may ask. Let us ask ourselves, do I have evidence, or is this a realistic way for me to be able to look at the situation? Can I look at the situation a different way, through a different lens, perhaps? Another way is to, how likely is it that I am not actually having all of the facts? And how am I able to have a better outcome? Another way is this thought helpful? Remember, we all have those automatic thoughts. So, in order for us to investigate, is this thought helpful? How am I worrying about this situation? And how can I see through another lens? What would I say to myself if I was to look at this situation or these thoughts through a different lens? Or perhaps what can I say to a friend who is also navigating this challenge? How about trying to follow some of these statements? You may ask, is this situation permanent? Is it temporary? What is going to happen if I say to myself, well, everything will be okay? One day, perhaps I will look back, or in the next hour, I will look at the situation through a different perspective. So, what I want for us to think about is how we're identifying anxious thoughts. And perhaps when we look at anxious thoughts, remember, thoughts, they come and go. So these anxious thoughts, are we looking at the worst case scenario? How are we able to build awareness when we are navigating anxious thoughts? This awareness is a state of mind where we're able to stop and pause for a moment. So, bringing your attention to, we call that in the therapeutic space, body scanning, when you're able to bring your attention to that emotion. Remember, every emotion communicates a need. So, if I'm able to bring my attention to that awareness, or I'm able to do or practice a body scan, that I'm able to identify the emotions. For example, is it fear? Is it me being anxious? Is it anger? Whatever those emotions are, we want to be able to bring our attention, our awareness to that particular thought that we're having. Then proceed to identify, how is it showing up physiologically, physically in your body. For some, they may experience tension, numbness, a pain in a particular part of their body. So, again, bringing our awareness, tuning in, aligning what we're experiencing physiologically, thoughtfully, And this way, we're able to identify the thought patterns. Let's brainstorm for a second when it comes to solutions, because you want to be able to find solution for that particular anxious thought. So if it's worry, consider, is this solvable? I know this is easier said than done. So is this solvable? How can I start to brainstorm? And if you are also, in therapy, you can brainstorm this with your therapist as well. So you can brainstorm these solution to the issue that you are facing, and what is this eliciting in terms of the anxious thoughts that you're having. So when it comes to worry, the more we focus on the issue, the more it is magnified. So you want to investigate, is this noteworthy? How true is this? And next, we're going to go to, is this problem solvable? So as I pause, I want you to be able to consider, sometimes you are not able to control what other people do. So if you think for a minute on the things that you have control over, very often my clients will be able to identify what the challenges are, investigate, explore what are the contributing factors to these issues. And then in that space, they're able to identify the thoughts that presents anxiousness. For them, perhaps they would be able to write down the thoughts. So let's do this for a second. If you're able to write the thoughts down, what emotion comes up, that is going to be, I would say, an asset or a tool for you to be able to process whatever the stressors are, the stressful situations. If you are identifying the situation and you're able to process that, then this is another way for you to be able to work through this. You cannot work through it, you cannot heal from it if you're not addressing it. So, this is another way to be able to identify, address it, process so you can work through it. Next, we want to be able to utilize the space for looking at the automatic thoughts that you're getting. This thought is often prevalent when you are experiencing anxious thoughts. What if? Have you ever noticed that what if tends to come up very frequently? Again, if you're looking at anxiety, you can look at it through the lens of acute anxiety, which is time, you know, sensitive if you want to. Also, you are thinking of chronic anxiety. This kind of anxiety persists over time. So then it becomes more chronic. You're dealing with this anxiety in terms of, is it real or imagined? And if it's also persistent over time. Another example would be, I am worried that, and you can finish that statement. I am afraid to fill in the blank. People are going to think, very often we come across this scenario as clinicians, people are going to think. And so this scenario, can be magnified, or someone may say, I've ruminated about this scenario. What if people are going to say? So this is again another example of what I mentioned previously. Look at the things that you are in control of, and perhaps the things that you're not in control of. Again, you cannot control what people do or what people say. You can only control what you do, your thoughts. So, how are we going to ask ourselves these questions? Do I have the evidence? Again, the automatic thoughts are definitely the spaces that we all go to before we further investigate, is this true? And if you are thinking from, a believer's standpoint, if you are, practicing Christian counseling, then again, perhaps you may be able to walk your clients through the biblical lens of, you know, whatever things are lovely, whatever things are honest, whatever things are pure. Again, you are able to do that. And so this is important if you are able to work from a spiritual lens, then of course you want to be able to incorporate as well the ABCs and integrate a spiritual component to that. And when I say ABC, I mean we're approaching this from a cognitive behavioral lens. The A is for the actual event. And what is the belief that, or what is the context that surrounds that belief? What is the consequence, right? And so the consequence in terms of the event, what is your belief system and how is the truth distorted at times? How are you able to implement this technique in your clinical space, as well as how is your client able to look at the actual event and look at the belief that surrounds this event? What is the context that they bring into this space so they can work through this? And as a result, is this solvable? Are they able to identify the distorted messages that surrounds this distressing situation and how they're able to work through this so they can be better for it in terms of working this through, focusing on what they have control over as opposed to what they don't have control over. And so this is going to look different again for everyone who works through this distress or challenge from a solution focused approach or a CBT lens. And so I wanted to just pause real quick for a second and just to be able to remind us how we identify anxious thoughts looks different for everyone. Again, no two individuals work through the issue the same way. But one thing I can attest to is if we're able to identify the event that becomes so stressful that we're not able to function, then it's going to be helpful to understand what are the distorted messages that we're having, the negative self-defeating messages perhaps that we ruminate over, or some people may consider it to be overthinking. And that's going to be helpful if you're able to identify it so that you can address it, work through it, and heal from it. So, as I summarize, and hopefully you think about practical steps that you're able to build awareness, look at the negative self defeating messages that you are experiencing. And once you are able to bring your attention to this scenario, then you will be able to pause for a second, think about what the distressing event is, identify the emotions that are surrounding this event, whether it's fear, whether it's anger and self blame. That's going to be helpful, guys. Another point I wanted to leave with you is once you have identified the emotions, contextualize it, of course, identify the physical feelings that is associated with these distressing thought patterns. It's going to be helpful to practice your body scan. How is it showing up? Not only emotionally, but physically. How is it affecting you spiritually, financially? All of these things are going to be important for your wellness. Again, you are able to brainstorm solutions with your therapist during your sessions. You're able to pinpoint the contributing factors that shows up for you. Challenge those anxious thoughts. Ask yourself these questions because they're very helpful when you're able to ask yourself these questions. Is this temporary? How am I able to work through these different scenarios and consider, it's useful for me as I practice mindfulness, right? Your breath work, again, those are going to be very important. If that's helpful for you, drop a comment. Again, I want to encourage you, leave a comment for me. If these tips are helpful, leave a comment for me. If you're able to identify those what ifs, those moments when you are navigating the fair, whatever shows up for you, write it down. If you're able to journal your thoughts, that's also considered helpful. So, again, guys, I wanted to just leave you with these simple tips, and hopefully, you're able to find, you know, usefulness in these moments when you're having difficulty with anxiety, and you're able to identify how are you responding. Is there more reactivity over response? How are you able to become more thoughtful and check in with yourself? Because again, you are not able to control what other people do. So the more that you're able to identify what shows up for you, how are you responding, how can you become more thoughtful to you, become more kind to yourself, give yourself permission to pause, to check in, practice those body scans so that you're able to live a life that is useful and healthy. You're able to practice wellness, guys. I am so, you know, concerned about how we're practicing our wellness. This is all about Heart Month, right? Like up this episode if you can, drop some hearts in the comments. you know, your heart is important for your overall wellness, holistic healing. That's where we want to focus as well. Mind, body, and soul. When you're able to pause for a second, think about, what you're navigating and reframe those thoughts, utilize your scriptures if you have to, uh, pause for a second, check in with yourself, utilize your playlist, whatever it is that helps you, mindfulness, that's going to be useful for your healing journey. Again, practice, 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 right? The same way that we learn these behaviors, it's the same way that we're going to unlearn, unhealthy practices. So, again, guys, like, share, subscribe, be well until the next podcast.